Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, let's discuss the manual testing concepts. Okay, if you need this PDF, I have uploaded this PDF in the SDET interview preparation kit. Please do check out. I have given the link in the description and also in the comment box. Okay, so manual testing is very important, guys, for every tester, irrespective of any level and irrespective of any type of testing he does. The manual testing concepts are must and should be known for each and every tester. Okay, so the very first question goes like, or the topic goes like, what is testing or what is software testing? Software testing is a method to check whether the software application matches the requirements and to ensure that the software is a bug or defect free. And there are totally 7 testing principles, which are: testing shows the presence of defects, and exhaustive testing is not possible, and should be started with early testing, and defect clustering, and pesticide paradox. Testing is context dependent, and absence of error fallacy. Okay, so and then the next topic comes immediately is about SDLC, okay, which is nothing but software development lifecycle, where it's a process of developing the software with various phases like requirement phase, design phase, build phase, testing phase, deployment phase, and maintenance phase. Okay, and then next comes the topic about SDLC. Okay, so SDLC is part of SDLC, guys. Okay, so the different stages in SDLC are requirement analysis, test plan creation, test case development, test environment setup, test execution, and test cycle closure. Okay, and what are the different types of environments we have in software industry? The development environment, which is specifically dedicated to the development team for performing the development activities. QA or testing environment, where testing team performs the execution on this environment. And the staging or the lab environment. After testing, the build is kept on staging or the lab environment. Here usually user acceptance testing is done before releasing the software. And then the production environment, this is the environment which the real user sees and uses. Okay, after all the testing is completed, the build is deployed on the production environment for the actual users. Okay, it's a live environment, guys. And then next we'll talk about the SDLC models. There are different types of models available in SDLC. The waterfall model, and for each model there are different phases and there are separate advantages and disadvantages. And then next comes about the iterative model, and then next comes the spiral model, and then comes the V-shape model, and then next comes the agile model. And there are different types of software testing that you should know. One is a manual testing and another is a automation testing. Okay, and there are some key differences between manual and automation testing. You have to aware about it. And what are the types of manual testing? Again, in the manual testing there are different categories: white box testing, which has been done by developer; black box testing, which has been done by test engineer; gray box testing, which is a combination of white box and black box. Okay, where a technical person who is aware about the code level knowledge as well as the testing knowledge will usually do this. Okay, we cannot exactly say it's a developer kind of or a tester kind of. Okay, so both should be aware about on how to perform gray box testing. Okay, so the next comes about the types of black box testing. There are 2 types of black box testing. Again, functional testing, where the functional requirements and specifications are properly tested, and non-functional testing. Non-functional testing like we can easily say performance testing as an example, like which are non-functional, like security testing, performance testing. Okay, so and then the differences between functional and non-functional testing is categorized, and there are different types of functional testing. Again, unit testing, integration testing, system testing, user acceptance testing. Okay, in some companies They also use a term called system integration testing. Okay, so the next different types of integration testing can be classified again. Incremental integration testing and then the non-incremental integration testing. Okay, you can go through these notes. You can understand the difference between stubs and drivers and everything in the top down and bottom up approach. Okay, and what exactly is a Big Bang method in the functional testing. Okay, and then next comes the non-functional testing part. Okay, again here you can see, right, performance against the non-functional testing parameters. We are testing the efficiency of the application, reliability of the application, performance, loading capacity, security testing, portability and accountability. Okay, so again, so we have categorized what is performance testing and what are the different types of performance testing and what are the different factors or the parameters considered in performance testing, like for response time, load, stability. Okay, and then the load testing, and how do we perform load testing, and we talked about stress testing. Okay, and then we talked about scalability testing, and then we talked about security testing, portability testing, reliability testing, efficiency testing. Okay, all this comes under the non-functional testing, and here you can see we have listed out the advantages of non-functional testing and then the disadvantages of non-functional testing. Okay, again, apart from functional and non-functional testing, there are various other types of testing: regression testing, smoke testing, sanity testing, recovery testing, alpha testing, beta testing, ad hoc testing, monkey testing, agile testing, retesting, and exploratory testing. Okay, so again, next we talked about the bug life cycle, on what are the different stages the bug usually go through in the entire life. Okay, so initially the state of the bug will be in new, and then it will move to assigned state, and then to the open state, and then to the fixed state, and then to the retesting if the bug is identified again, and then the reopened state, verified, and then finally closed state. Okay, in case if the bug is a duplicate, we will go ahead and assign the bug to the duplicate status, and then the reject, or if the bug is rejected, we'll mark the status as rejected. And if the bug is not a prime priority, and if it can be get fixed in the next release, we can mark the bug as deferred status, and then finally not a bug status. Okay, if if it's the actual functionality of the application, then we mark that as a not a bug. Okay, and then next comes the important topic, that's severity and priority in testing. What exactly is severity and what exactly is priority, and what are the different examples to understand the criticality and non-criticality and the priority of low and urgency of a critical or non-critical bug. Okay, so and then we talked about the difference between test scenario and test cases by taking scenarios. Okay, you can see, right, so we have taken different scenarios to understand the difference between test scenario and the test cases. Okay, and then we talked about the boundary value analysis, and then we talked about the equivalence partitioning, and then we have also spoke about the requirement traceability matrix, about RTM, and then we talked about the difference between error, defect, bug and failure, and we talked about the entry and exit criteria, and then we also talked about the authentication and authorization difference, and then we talked about what is the defect rejection ratio, and then we talked about defect leakage ratio on how to identify, and about the defect density, and we have also talked about the decision table testing, and then we talked about the state transition testing. Okay guys, these are all testing techniques. Okay, and Again, the types of state transition diagram. Okay, and then we talked about the difference between load testing and stress testing. And then we talked about the accurate differences between smoke testing and sanity testing. And then we talked about the difference between system testing versus acceptance testing. And then we talked about the differences between alpha testing and beta testing. And then we talked about the globalization testing. And then we talked about the localization testing. And then we talked about test plan, test strategy, and what's positive testing and what's negative testing. Okay, and then we talked about the bug release, and then we talked about what is defect cascading and how do you prevent defect cascading from happening in your own software testing process. Okay, and then we talked about the software testing metrics. Okay, and then we talked about the testing metrics life cycle, and then we talked about the defect triaging. Okay, yeah, so this is the last topic that we have covered in the documentation. Okay, so if you need this PDF, I have uploaded this PDF in the interview preparation kit. Please do check out. It's really helpful for clearing the interviews, where you can confidently crack any interviews and you can confidently work in real-time projects. Okay, so please do check out and let me know if you have any queries or questions in the comment box or in the description box. Okay, or in the email, sorry. Thank you so much for watching my video. All the best for your upcoming interview. Happy learning, happy testing.